to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn even more money. All in one place, and it's for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup looks like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts, Q&A, and polls has let us be creative on a whole other level. I highly recommend you give it a try. So download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome back, X's and T podcast fans. It is Danny here, back at it again with another episode, you guys. I just have so much gratitude. I have so many people to thank just for reaching out, for wanting to share your stories. And it really does mean a lot. And I love getting the feedback from, what people thought about other people's stories. I love hearing that too. So thank you again. Today, you guys, we are going to be talking again about Worldwide Dream Builders and Amway. I have to say that there is never going to be a shortage of stories ever, because even though you guys have heard one story, you may have heard two. You guys, they're each individually different. Every single person has a different perspective as to what they went through. And I think it's important for every single story to be told and to be heard. And I feel like every time too, I'm always like, man, I forgot about this. Oh my God, that happened. Every single time a new memory is unlocked. I just want to give a quick disclaimer, as I always have to. I'm not here to defame anybody, okay? If you guys want to join Worldwide, if you guys want to sell Amway products, like, do your thing. I'm not telling you not to, but I do think that these stories are important, and I would highly encourage you to listen to them before making the decision to enter either of these two entities. My beef is mostly with Worldwide Dream Builders. It is mostly with all of these lines of affiliation. Again, I'm going to be speaking on personal experiences. I do have a guest today who will be speaking on their personal experiences, our personal opinions. Again, not here to defame anybody. In fact, we changed all of the names purely because we're not here to ruin anybody's lives. I mean, they've ruined our lives enough. We're not those people. If we were, we'd still be in the organization. With that being said as well, Amway allegedly does co-sign what they do. So do with that information what you will. I personally do not like their products as of my personal opinion. So don't sue me. I can't say that enough. Don't do it. Okay. You guys, I have an amazing guest who is actually from my neck of the woods in sort of the Pacific Northwestern area. And this person is actually kind of in a closer, I think, to my upline than anybody I've ever spoken to before. So I'm really excited. I have Hannah with us. And just so you guys know, this is an anonymous person. Her name has been changed. So welcome, Hannah.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. How did you find this podcast?
So I had been out of the organization for a while, and every few months or probably 6 or so, I'd kind of start Googling and just reading stuff online. And this last time I did that, I searched on TikTok instead. And I found a few people stitching your video. I think it was someone stitched it. And then I listened to your a piece of your story that you had posted. And I was like, oh, that's exactly what I experienced. And I was kind of I hadn't really thought about it negatively yet. And so it was I'd read a lot of negative stuff and I was like, I'm glad I'm out, blah, blah, blah. But had still viewed myself kind of as that quitter mentality. And so I listened to your stories and then also your stories with your exes and stuff. And I was just drawn to it. I was like, wow, maybe I wasn't a cult. Maybe that wasn't a bad, maybe I wasn't the bad problem here.
Yeah, definitely. And it's okay. I feel like everybody's view on Worldwide or whatever MLM they leave, it can take time to view it negatively. Some people never really do. So however anybody, whether it's you or somebody else, however you view that is totally okay. There's no right or wrong answers. But I'm really glad that you were able to find this podcast. And again, I can't thank you enough for wanting to come here and share. What is it that really compels you to want to share your story?
I think a big part of the reason that I got into Worldwide in the first place was the will to help people. I mean, they definitely sold this as your self-help, your betterment. I even remember, them praising this girl for just wanting the association. She didn't even want to build her business, things like that. I think like if I'm able to share my story, then I can actually help people. Whereas I felt very manipulative after as I left, like it was hard for me to make relationships for a long time due to just the way they like taught you to talk to people. Like, I don't know, it was weird.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense too, because they get to you because you want to help people. Like that's the goal, right? You want to be people focused. They pitch this incredible dream of like, no, you're going to help so many people. This is the greatest opportunity in the world. Like you couldn't ever find anything better than this. And not only that, not only do you have access to this quote fantastic organization, you get to offer it to other people. That is exactly how it is given. And who's going to say no to that? Come on, it sounds fantastic. They found your pain points and it sounded great. I mean, all of us who have been in, somebody somewhere told us that this was the greatest thing and we absolutely believed it. So no, hey, it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, no, I really do think that sharing your story is going to make a huge difference because what's funny is they say this shit in worldwide too. So I apologize. But I think that every person is going to interpret somebody's story differently. And I think that everybody's going to interpret, it's like somebody's going to find your story and they're going to really relate to it, or they're going to hear maybe Bree's story or Hope's story or Fisher's side of things. Like somebody's going to kind of speak to them specifically. So when you got you were 19 years old, right?
I was 19 in college, so I was in my last semester before I graduated, and I was working at a fast food location, and just like all hours, like I was doing as much as possible. So I was grinding at 19. I ended up graduating and like launching like right after graduation
Yeah. So
from
you were
college.
really like successful. I mean, for 19 years old, not to say the other 19-year-olds aren't successful, but you had it together because you were even living on your own, weren't you?
I was fully like moved out into my own place, in like a little duplex. It wasn't that great of a location, but hey, I was 19.
Yeah, you had it together, which is amazing. And to be a college student and be approached by these people, I could imagine that, something about what they said really intrigued you. So, did you know the person who sponsored you or who would, I guess, take you, quote, through a process? Did you know for a long period of time or how did you get to know them?
Yeah, so I actually met my upline at a Starbucks. So I was on break at the fast food place. So I was in my little uniform. They have like a hat. And I looked 12 years old in this hat. Like I straight up did not look like an adult. But I was at my computer sitting down at like one of the bigger tables at a Starbucks that was right across the street from the location. And I was studying for a test, I believe. I was like about to take it, and it was like a really busy Starbucks. So I later learned she was probably in between meetings, but she, like needed to sit down. So kind of like started, asking me questions and stuff. And I was like in my customer service, like, so I kind of like chatted with her a little bit. She's like asking me like, oh, like, what do you do for work? Which, she was asking all the questions. And then I was like, oh, like I'm studying right now, like I'm about to graduate, blah, blah, blah. And she was like so impressed with that. She's like, wow, like that's really cool. Like, I can't believe you look so young. And she was like, hey, like, like, what are you doing next? Like, do you have a job lined up? And obviously, I was like, no, like, I'm still looking into other things. Like, I'm definitely trying to get out of, the fast food industry, whatever. And so she was like, oh, well, like, I work at X bank. I like definitely might have some like connections and, I know like all these people, and she was just like talking really highly about her upline essentially and her job. First, like I thought this was like related to that bank. Like I'm like, so then she was like just talking about like how she had these connections who had been able to like create their own, streams of income that were helping businesses grow their impact or like grow their network or whatever. The way they phrased everything was so professional. Like she was talking about like adding revenue streams to corporations like Nike and stuff like that. She ended up taking my phone number at that, and then we met like a couple days later, and then I met with her and Michaela, her upline, a few days later, and then they plugged me into a board plan or like meeting that night. I should have known, like, it was kind of weird to have this, "Oh, like, there's not that many seats, blah, blah, blah," but then they could get me in, like, one night, but
Yes. They do that. Oh my yeah, they use buzzwords that sound really professional, of course, like, "Oh, yeah, you must know what you're talking about. Revenue stream? Who uses revenue stream?" Or, contracting with Fortune 500 companies. Again, total buzzwords, which is funny, they can't say that anymore. At least I've heard allegedly that they can't say that anymore because the partner stores or whatever. Because 'cause they're just talking about partner stores with Amway. Like, they never mention that.
mhm.
But yeah, the buzzwords. Of course, they're totally. And then you think, "Oh my gosh," like, they use that, scarcity mindset to get to you, right? There's limited seats. I don't know if I can get you in. Let me make a phone call. Of course, they BS. "Oh, I'm calling my upline." "Oh, yeah, you know what? We can actually get you a seat." Like, they do that, and it's so predatory, but it works, right? It's
And
like
she yeah.
you take them seriously. Like, they sound like, "Oh, they're a big deal."
And they're talking about, like, the whole time, like, this is all based on your mindset, like, they're drawing, you know, their little plan thing out with the people and the money and the why and the who. They had all these, like, little equations and stuff, like, I don't know, I do pride myself on my intelligence, but this was definitely an interesting move on my part, but I was interested in building my network. I mean, to some degree, it is who you know, not just what you know, and so I was interested in finding people who knew things that I didn't know, who were places that I haven't been and haven't had access to, you know? I don't want to like say too much, but like I was raised like pretty like in poverty and I definitely watched my parents come out of it. They're comfortably middle class. But when I was young, like we were insecure about that stuff, you know? Now, granted, my dad had graduated college. So again, I do have my privileges, but I definitely watched those struggles and I did not want to experience that. And I am a hard worker. And so I was driven. Like, they were like, would you shovel manure for 2 years? Who would not shovel for
Yeah.
manure for 2 years to get unlimited access to money? Like, that's just the
Yep.
dumbest question ever.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and they found you at a time too where you're probably, like, ready to do anything at that point. I mean, you're in the food industry, you probably hated it. Sounds like you did anyways, and, they are like they knew you were ambitious. Any sort of level of, like, you're ambitious, they are on that. Like, you are the prime candidate because they see you as somebody who's actually going to take it seriously, which is fantastic because it sounds like you take stuff seriously. I mean, you were in college, you were studying at a Starbucks on your lunch break, like, that shows dedication to what you were doing. And honestly, I would not at all like think about this negatively on your intelligence. You are a very intelligent person. I've gotten to know you and honestly like you're so smart. They are just manipulative. And that doesn't mean that the person who is because I've been manipulated too. That doesn't mean that you lack intelligence. That just means they found an insecurity that they were able to play on. So don't just you feel confident knowing that it's them, not you, for sure.
No, I appreciate you saying that. I definitely had a lot going for myself, and unfortunately, I was kind of primed to be taken advantage of in this way. I was raised extremely like religiously, and God bless my parents, but they definitely set me up to be like love bombed in this way. I had just moved down to the area like a little like about a year prior and so in my senior year of high school had moved to this new area and I was like pretty much by myself. Like I had family in the area. Long story short, my parents were moving to Hawaii, so a shift
Yeah.
happening. So I didn't have like a ton of friends. Like I mean I definitely had like a good network of people I was like hanging out with and stuff, but I've always felt like, oh, like I don't have friends. I'm actually like stopping saying that. I have a ton of friends, but I don't know. It was like a mindset, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they found you in a time where you were just kinda going through it, whether it was school or your job or whatever it was, you were going through it, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. So, my grandma had like passed away like right before this. And there's just a lot. There was a lot going on in my life at the time. And so I suppose I was just looking for someone or some people to have a community with. I mean, the way that she was talking about her upline was these are my best friends. They've introduced me to so many like amazing positive things in my life. Like I've been able to one thing they all would say was I was able to get off antidepressants and things like that. Like they talked so
Yep.
heavily about just the progress that they had made, and it sounded so positive. at the time I was not on the antidepressants, but I was consistently stressed out and overwhelmed due to everything going on in my life. So,
That's dangerous. When we were talking, I was like, "Yeah, I heard somebody say this," and I told you who it was, and you're like, "That was my upline." I was like, "Okay." So your upline is, again, we have changed all of their names, but we're gonna call them Devin and Raven. And Devin and Raven are actually it's really interesting how their business is connected some way to the line of sponsorship I was in. So again, I was sponsored into John and Barbara's business. John and Barbara were sponsored by their son. I don't have a name for him and his wife. Raven is their daughter. Their daughter moved from John and Barbara's business, married a crossline. She is now in this crosslines business. So that is how I am sort of weirdly connected to her organization. But yes, that was one of the first things in a night owl at family reunion when I was taken over to Raven was that's what she said. And I can remember thinking like, oh, that's amazing. But looking back, I'm like, how dangerous is that? These are not counselors. These are not professionals. Who are you to tell anybody that because of this organization, you were able to get off a medication that you may still need to this day?
I have a lot of thoughts really fast because the part about like these are not counselors, like they always talked about having to earn their way on a stage and earn all these things, but most of them didn't have degrees. And I mean, the few that happen to have been successful and their businesses and stuff, like they definitely focused on, oh, but they're leaving all that behind to build this business, or like they've, like the one pharmacy guy like had all these pharmacies. He was fine to keep them open and keep that income, but like other people had to close their businesses, stuff like that. Yeah, and then the other piece is that like Raven moving into Devin's business always confused me because why would they make someone who built the business and more successfully? I'm pretty sure she had a bigger business at the time, but I wasn't in, so I don't know. I could be wrong. But why would she have to leave the people that she had become friends with to join somebody else's, and supposedly they're her best friends, but now they're her cross line and she's no longer involved in their development or whatever. It's like, what's happening to that relationship then? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know what's really interesting? They always do it to the women. When crossline, which is really funny because they say don't crossline, right? But then there's, oh, but you can crossline, but you have to counsel up first. We all have to be in agreement together that you guys can date. But it's like, don't crossline. So like how do you do that? It just doesn't make any fucking sense. It's hypocritical, is what it is. But they always do it to the women. The women have to drop their business to go into to sign with the husband's business, and that's really sad. And that diminishes all of the hard work that she had. She was a single. She was probably at the time praised as a single, and then as soon as she gets a husband, it's him who did all of the work. She just supported him. Like they somehow changed the
Yeah.
narrative.
Yes. And the supported him thing is so crazy because they would talk so highly of Devin and all of these things that he had done. And then they would talk about Raven controlling his calendar and booking all of his meetings and making sure that it's up to date and like making sure that he has time for every little thing. And it's like, okay, so who actually did the work? Because it sounds like she has a way harder job. Like, first of all, my job, like I won't say too much about it, but I'm essentially an executive secretary to like salespeople. And that is a hard, like there is so much that goes into it. And I am paid a lot of money to do that. And like she's just chilling with her two boys, probably has a limit on the debit card that she can spend. Like I don't
No, you're right. Absolutely. Devin and Raven, such an interesting couple because Devin's story kind of frustrates me. And the only reason it does is because he was like the poster child for it doesn't matter Yale or jail, right? They would always say that it doesn't matter where you're from, you can join this business and it can change you. And my upline would point out Devin and be like, okay, we know your ex boyfriend is a felon and he's coming out of prison, and even though he abused you, he can come into this organization and he can change. They would use Devin as an example. So, would you mind telling us a little bit about Devin and Raven's stories? And those are like the things that you had heard from them. And maybe like, what is it that they had said that really made you want to join the business? And then now looking back, what are some things that you're like, that's horrible?
Yeah, so I'll talk about like my first couple plans, when it was really like new and I was just writing everything down and really like getting into it. They A lot of it would focus on principles and moving business forward, and this stuff can apply to any part of life. This stuff can be applied to your job. This stuff can be applied to your relationships, blah blah blah, blah. So when I was in, there was a setup process. I did read a book, and like I think there was a couple books that I had to read before I like got launched. I think it was two or three. The first two were pretty short, and then I think the third one was like the Compound Effect, which is like a little bit longer. Good book though. I think will say it's a solid book. I still quote that one a lot. So when I was in this meeting for the first time and everyone's like sitting in like full business professional, like I was kind of just drawn into how everyone talked to each other, talked about each other, were just so positive. The energy in the room was so positive. Like I later learned toxically positive, but everyone seemed to be loving it. They had a section where they would like be like, I don't think this was at my first meeting, but down the line, they would have people stand up like, who, if you've been helped positively financially in this business, like, please stand up. And at one point, I even stood up for that. But it's like, they've convinced you that spending all this money on products like hundreds of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, but like hundreds and thousands of dollars on these products, and it's, oh, building your business, it's your investment, it's like what you can do. A lot of the
Cool.
principles that they started with ended up being way more manipulative and applied way more toxically than they let on in the beginning. They really prime you for each step of the process. They even tell you they're doing it, like, oh, you're earning this information, you're earning this information. Just so you know, if you're in this process, that is not how a business works. They tell you up front what you're getting into and let you know. So even though you're not signing any docs in this process or anything, that is a manipulation tactic and not ethical. They should be explained. I didn't know it was Amway until I was already like so involved in this process. Like
Yeah.
it was like my budget meeting pretty much that they like told me it was Amway. And like that's like one of the last steps in the process, just if you can get your mind. I was around this organization for almost 3 months before they told me it was Amway. So, and I was stupid because my parents were like, this sounds like an MLM, but I was like coming back to religion. So they were kind of happy about that. So my parents were against it, but they also were kind of like, maybe it's not so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
When they learned it was Amway, they were like, I told you so. But then they wouldn't really buy stuff because my mom's super frugal. They kind of would help.
Okay, so I actually want to point out something that you're saying. So, what's interesting is they would tell us this is how all businesses conduct their interviews. That's not true. You're absolutely right. A business that is like an actual functioning business, a legitimate moral business is going to tell you what your expectations are up front. They're going to tell you what position you're applying for. They're going to tell you what they expect of you, and they're going to say, "We're going to continue this process because you're going to meet our, sales manager. You're going to meet our and you know what you're doing."
They gave me Devin's name, but they didn't really want to give me like a last name. Like it was kind of weird. They're like, they did end up giving me the last name because I asked him, but you could just tell he's like, whatever it was. And then it was just like, oh, you can Google him, but like, remember, like, keep your mind open or whatever. And I did Google, so he did have a criminal record, but I wasn't able to really, like, I didn't know who I was looking for, when I first started Googling. So I didn't know. And then when we got into the board plan, he addressed every single meeting, he addressed his story. So, as if to give clarity, I suppose, of like, I'm not a criminal, I'm not like that. Fun fact. So I'll go into his story a little bit. He would say this very publicly. So he said that he got really drunk and was taking sleeping pills and went to his girlfriend's house, or what he believed was his girlfriend's apartment. And it was like a floor down, and like walked into this guy's apartment. And obviously, like, this guy's gonna be mad, So like the guy like started getting mad at, or like telling him to leave or whatever. And Devin felt like he was, cheating with his girlfriend or something in his drunken stupor. And I guess like B started beating up this guy. Devin was a wrestler. He was very like, I don't think pro, but like high school and college wrestler. He ended up getting kicked off the team because of this incident. So he was very strong when he was beating this guy. So even though he made it seem like it was an equal fight, I highly doubt that's the case. Maybe it wasn't the under, like allegedly. Maybe
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. It would be a neighbor you didn't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. One, I think he's over exaggerating the story to try to make himself look better than he is, to be like, oh, I can admit that I did this. However, I have since changed. They all did that. They all would, one way or another, exaggerate their stories. Remember, the club owner would be like, I was homeless for 2 weeks. Oh, you couch surfed for 2 weeks, my guy. Congratulations. You've really been reformed
He would
on,
talk about like
um,
smoking too, and it was like ridiculous because
yeah.
he was like at the end of it, like because he would always exaggerate. And I remember like sometimes he would say like, "Oh, like I would take like 5 hits before I left or whatever." But then I remember sometimes he was saying like 10 to 15.
Yeah. That I really do. I do think that there is a level of just the way that they say it.
But that was his story. So he would say like, like I was young and dumb and I had all this testosterone. I didn't have a dad. I wasn't raised with a dad. He would always talk about that and just like, well, like all these excuses basically. Even the way that he phrased the guy, like even if it was a random dude's house, he would say like the way that he would phrase the interaction, it was like the guy coming at him. Dude, you're breaking and entering. I would come at you with a gun. Like, go
Yeah.
away. Like, my husband right now would definitely have been coming at you with a gun. So, like, you're lucky all they did was fight if it was a stranger.
Yeah. I don't believe his story. Not for 2 seconds do I believe his story. I think that there's a lot of things that they use in his story, like the fact that he was in jail and that he is now a supposed millionaire is what they would have you believe. That's what frustrates me
Yeah.
about that. um, but what about Raven? What was her story and what was she like, I guess, before the business?
Raven was what I believe to be like an amazing woman. Like I really connected with her. She was such a free spirit. And before the business, like when she would talk about her time, I actually heard her give the plan a couple times, which was pretty uncommon. It was typically the men who would give the talks, and even like single women wouldn't really give the talks, but every once in a while wasn't able to be there. So she would kind of step up and she talked about her life before. She was living in a van for a little bit. She had I like would seem like a ton of support from her family. So John and Barbara, right?
Yeah.
Her brother, I think her brother is the one that ended up introducing her to the business. So um
Yes.
he was going, and she said like she was just like smoking all the time and like living in a van and just being like free to the wind. But like if you're living in a van, like she was working, like she wasn't just doing nothing. She just talked so negatively of herself during that time. Even showed like a picture once of her like on a skateboard, just looking like she was chilling, like it didn't look bad. But she was like, oh, like this is how I would act, or like I can't believe I like portrayed myself like
Yeah.
this. She would like talk about like being stoned like the first time she heard the talk and stuff, and then say like, oh, like I've changed so much, like like I don't feel like I need that to feel good, like I love my life now, blah blah blah. Like she would always talk about that. So it sounded like she really just wanted freedom in her life, and that was for her sticking point. She talked about it a lot of just like wanting to be able to have a life that like she chose. But from my understanding, she doesn't really choose much of anything that they do. So
Yeah. And that was kind of what we heard about her too, because of course she was daughter to my upline and sister to my upline. So we did hear a lot about her and her story. And I think you're right. She absolutely sounded like somebody who, just lived her life. Maybe they don't view it as the most successful, but she was young. Like she could have gone any which direction, and somehow, some way, this was the best thing for her. Um, Of course, I can't speak to her as a person because I really didn't get to know her. But the one thing I do remember her saying for the first time when I was introduced to her was that she got off antidepressants, and that really stuck with me. It stuck with me in a way that I thought was good. Now that I realized was really bad. And after getting to know these people, I'm sure you had just at least some period of time where you were pretty happy. What did your honeymoon phase look like?
So one thing I'll say with Raven too is like she definitely was like a very positive light of a person. Like she believed what she was doing was good. But it kind of comes back to that they aren't counselors, they don't have degrees. But and some of our one-on-ones, like it very much like teetered into therapy. And that's like this thing, like they always talk about earning these relationships, earning these times on stage, but they don't actually do anything other than manipulate enough people. And so it's kind of crazy to me. I don't know. Some of their habits are good. Like they would have you read for a certain amount of time and like pour into yourself every day. Like those are solid traits, but they would do it so excessively and so toxically that when I left, I like genuinely didn't want to do anything for months to work on myself. Like I was like, I'm not setting goals, like I'm not talking about this stuff. Like so it's just kind of crazy like how much that goes into. But my honeymoon phase, I thought a lot about this question and I would truly say like because my transition to viewing it negatively took so long, I feel like it really was like the whole time. There were a lot of moments at the end when I started getting out that broke like the friendship crystals that I was seeing, you know, like that rose colored glass. I started getting really sick at the end just due to like chronic illness and how much stress and activity I was under and how little sleep I was getting and the horrible nutrition they had me on because I was on like a million vitamins and then also like only eating protein bars and popcorn. So, like, not a great diet. And it's crazy. Like, they increased my budget by hundreds of dollars and decreased my grocery budget by like so much money. And that should have been such a red flag for me, but I was already in by that point. Like, the budget meeting was before you launch, but I was already in at that point to be an
Yeah.
adult and have someone tell you how to spend your money and stuff like that, like outside of like maybe your spouse, definitely agree on that with them. But like, you don't earn this money. Like, ma'am, you are not me. Like, unless you were me or my spouse, like, do not tell me how to spend my money. But yeah, so unfortunately, my honeymoon phase, it took a long time to get out of. I think I got out of it when I like actually stopped going to meetings and stuff, but I viewed myself as a quitter for a long time afterwards. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's hard, kind of going back to what you were saying as far as like they're not counselors, but they're also telling you what to do. And the fact that they limited your grocery budget is very, very sad and frustrating. And they would do that though. That checks out. I mean, they would say, just consume your products, only buy from your store. Like you don't need to even go to the grocery store. And then they would have platinums come on stage and be like, we lived off of bars until we, went platinum or whatever. And that's not healthy. That's not good. And have you ever eaten one of those bars? Your mouth definitely fucking hurt afterwards. Like I'm surprised I didn't fucking have teeth come out from those stupid things and the popcorn. And I didn't eat fucking tortilla chips forever after that
I
fucking
actually
business.
hated the tortilla chips. I would not eat those. I'm like picky with my tortilla chips anyway. I'm like, no, those things tasted so bad. I refuse to eat them. And the Frito things, no,
Yeah, they were bad. There
so
was
bad.
none of it was good. I tricked
I
myself
liked the
into liking this stuff.
popcorn, but
The popcorn was okay, but I think like excess, for example, I convinced myself that I liked it. Realistically, I was not about it. I liked the cherry cola one. That was the only one I think I remotely was interested in. But of course, try new ones, like drink new ones, but have the kind that your upline likes. Have the kind that your upline likes to serve on your upline. Make sure you have theirs on. And my upline like the stupid grape ones. I hated the grape ones. Those are nasty.
why can't your upline afford it also if you're making them so much money? Like, that's the other thing is I always thought it was weird. Like, they would be giving gifts to like Raven and Devin, and they would be doing like all of this stuff. And I was like, they're supposedly earning hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you guys annually. Why are you doing this? If they're helping people, where is the help? Why are you not helping your best friends? Why are your best friends living in poverty while you are like going out? And as I've like increased, so I was working in a fast food place when I first met them. I ended up like leaving that job and then like interviewing and getting a job at like a corporate environment shortly thereafter, they would always like take credit for that. And like I would kind of give him credit too and be like, oh, like it was their connection that got me in. But like they did, it was not their connection. Like my direct uplines didn't really know anything about this corporation outside of like there are people in it that are still in worldwide, or at least I don't know if they're still in worldwide, but we're in worldwide at the time.
Yeah.
Saying all that, like they definitely maybe helped me interview, but I had gotten the majority of jobs I interviewed for previous to that. Like I was going places, like I don't know, maybe they helped me interview, but maybe also I can give myself credit for that one.
Oh, definitely. I think you did more of the work than they did. And you're right. Like, where is the help? And you know what's funny is you said something that really like just I was really brought back as you said they're supposed to be your best friends. And you're like, I hardly ever hung out with these people. And I was like, oh my God. The only times I ever got to hang out with them was for business specific things. We would go to what we have in Oregon. We had a Street of Dreams where we would go and look at all these houses. That's where we would go to hang out. Or we would go to a house opening when we go look like dream building is what they would say. That's what we would do. That's the only hanging out, or you had to earn their time. They would only hang out with people who were, quote, building the business. They didn't have time for you outside of that. And
Yeah.
you bringing that up was such a good point. Did you ever have really an opportunity to hang out with your upline outside?
No, not really. So, like you said, there was like dream building activities. So, my upline that introduced me, we'll call her Lisa. She was so great. She had like a lot of tattoos, very fun, but I mean, also not great because she manipulated me a lot. But like, genuinely, like, I thought of her as like a good person, like friendly, but she lived like pretty far away from me in Oregon. And I was living in Washington, but when we had met, we met in Oregon due to like me having like worked in both places. So it was like I didn't ever really hang out with her one on one. Like it was like only business stuff with her. And like that wasn't on purpose. It was just like, I guess both of us busy. She had kids, stuff like that. With Michaela, her like my upline that actually like, took me through the process. We hung out like a couple times, but it was always like dream building or like building the business. And I was very gung ho about this business when I first started. I think I started bringing people around before I launched. I was like, I thought that I was helping people. I thought that this was like the most amazing organization. I thought it was bringing people together. Like they always talk about like a 1% divorce rate, which, yeah, because they kick everyone who gets divorced out, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then they just don't count it. Like if one person stays in and not the other person, it's not a divorce or something. I don't really understand, but no, literally, it's insane. I feel like they just make up a lot of their positives about the business because once it goes back to me standing up with like, oh, if you've been positively impacted, like once you're so ingrained and manipulated and like brainwashed into this organization, everything positive you do is because of them, and everything negative that you do is because you're bad. And no offense to people who like believe in God and like follow that, but it was in my same experience that same thing. Like when you're good, like thank God, and when you're bad, like you're a sinner and a devil. Like
Okay, so actually, what you kind of sparked in a memory. I remember one of the things that they used to do. Like you said, they talk about things and they're very toxic and they're positive and they like to exaggerate. I remember Taylor, the club owner, who was also in your upline. He would always say at the beginning of things, "We project that we are going to retire 20 to 30 people this year." Or he would say, "Stand up if you are in the 1% of the North American market." All that meant was Eagles and above stand up. That's all that fucking meant, and they're not in the top 1%. That's not how that works. And they would never know if they were going to actually retire 20 to 30 people. They never actually did. I saw maybe like in my course of 3 years, I saw maybe like 3 people leave their jobs. And one of them actually, which is funny because he's also in our upline, I heard allegedly he got a job and he was a CPA accountant and owned car dealerships before he got in the business. If you know who I'm talking about, y'all know who I'm talking about. He's bald. So yeah, apparently he
yeah.
had to get a job. So, but he got it because he was bored. So that was fun to learn about. But no, they exaggerated a lot of those things, and a lot of those things were like, no, I feel like I can get there. I feel like I can get that. But then later on, you're like, no, they didn't retire 20 to 30 people, or they may have gotten Like they take credit for getting me a better job. So yeah, I absolutely was the person who stood up and was like, yeah, they've helped me financially. You have a better job. You're in a better financial standing. No, the fuck I was not. I had one job and I was doing two side hustles. By the time I left, I had three jobs and I was doing side hustles and I had a brand new baby. That's not being in a better financial standing. I was in fucking debt when I left. Well, actually, okay. Truth be told, I was not in debt, but I was debt free when I got into the business and I had 10K in the bank. I'm not ashamed to say that. I am ashamed to say that they took that money like that. It was gone because they would say, invest it in your business. You're investing it in yourself. All I was doing was giving it to Amway. And quick
Yeah.
question, was there any point in time where they went over in detail about the fact that allegedly platinums and above get paid on the training tools?
No, and when you said that, that blew my mind because I am like 99% sure they said that they explicitly don't get paid on it. But I'm like vividly remembering them being like, like all these speakers, like they don't get paid, blah, blah, blah. And you're assuming if they're not getting paid there, then that would also transfer to audio like send outs. But what? Like that's like crazy. That's another piece of the manipulation. As long as it's technically true, it's fine in their eyes. And they would even say, like, I know someone else on your podcast mentioned this, but about oh, like we legally have to show you this document, but I can say we all make more than this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, how is that not literally illegal in what they are saying not to do? Like, how, like, that's not circumventing the rules. Like, and you could talk about your experience if they were telling the truth. I don't know. At the bonus times, they were like, oh, we got like a $30,000 month, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, my job, I get over like almost a $20,000 bonus in the corporate world. Like that's normal. That's like a lot of companies do that. And the way that they talked about this bonus was like, oh, like that's just like a little extra. But like, no, that was like the majority of their earnings were in these two bonus periods. And that's like not how they presented it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they would do that, and I think you're right. I think that people who are in your industry, they're like, oh yeah, no, like this happens, like, and they pretend like it doesn't happen in any other place but this. And kind of to touch back on the getting paid aspect, and I think I sent you the audio. At the end of every Worldwide Dream Builder audio, you guys, it was right under our fucking noses. It says that the income portrayed might not be just Amway. It could come from the sale of business tools or outside investments. They always say we don't have any outside investments. In fact, I was listening to an old audio where somebody said, you guys are listening to someone who retired at 25 and has no outside investments." Bullshit. Because respectfully, the tools, in my humble opinion, are an outside fucking investment. You're getting money from something outside of Amway. You are trying to tell your IBOs that you're getting all of this money just from Amway. And never, ever did they ever talk about the fact that at platinum and above, you're allegedly getting money. And I feel like I don't even have to say allegedly anymore. I'm going to. But the disclaimer at the end of the fucking audios states it right there. And when I was in, they sped
Yeah.
it up. There were just words at the end of an audio. Usually there was a bunch of clapping, and I'd end the audio even before, like at the clapping part. I wouldn't even listen to the end. How many people actually listen to the fucking end of their audios? And even if they did, who's questioning it? Like no one's thinking like, oh shit, that's where most of their money allegedly is coming from. Sorry, I get really
Yeah.
passionate and like angry about that. But these are all really big red flags. And I know you said, oh, your honeymoon phase was kind of the length of your time in the business. But now looking back, what are some red flags that you're like, oh, and I know we've been talking quite a bit about them, but things that stand out to you that you're like, no, like this was a big red flag.
I mean, I guess like pretty much everything they did now, like looking back, I'm just like, wow, why did I believe that? But at the time, I think I was just looking for friendship, and they were like supposedly very good friends. Like it was like a positive force in my life. I don't know. They would talk a lot about just, it's not really the business, like, I'm just in it to get a positive association and get around people who like make so much money and like I just want to learn like all this stuff. They really focused on education. But then when I got accepted to, my top university that I wanted to go to, they encouraged me not to. And I ended up not going, for financial reasons, but also heavily encouraged by them. And had it not been encouraged by them, like I likely would have gone above and beyond to figure out that financial situation, or maybe just gone into debt because school debt is not that big of a deal. Like they were
Yes.
so negative on all these things. I think that's another red flag. They really talked about like, oh, I have a degree, but like education is like nothing. Like who needs like education? But then they wanted to be like mentored by people like that, like in this business and stuff. I don't know. I feel like those are very contradictory. Like, why do you not want someone to get a solid, preference before you listen to them? Now, granted, our current education system needs a lot of reform, especially in the universities. In general, no, like having a degree is a good thing. And to think that at one point I was like just believing people who said like, oh, like you don't need that, or like that doesn't matter for your future. I mean, I'm really lucky that maybe for me specifically, it's not going to be that big of a deterrent in my future. But that was horrible advice to give a 19-year-old. That was horrible advice. Feel ashamed for taking it,
Yeah.
but I shouldn't, because ultimately I was
Yeah.
at that point when I got accepted and everything, I was very heavily manipulated. And I'm fortunate that
Yeah.
I did already have like a degree of some sort. So
Right. And that's okay too. You know what's funny is you kind of sparked something that I was going to say earlier, but you're right. When it comes to them being on stage, you're right. The only reason that they are able to get to that level is manipulation, manipulating people. All they did was talk to a bunch of people who talked to a bunch of people who talked to a bunch of people. They want to say, oh, you don't become a leader until you're ready. Like one day it's just going to happen. It's a compound effect. Like you do all these good habits and then boom, you explode overnight, or you're reading all this stuff. It's like all it is you're on stage. You're able to be speaking the way that they want you to because you're so brainwashed. All you did was manipulate people to get there. You're absolutely right when you said that. And you're right. A lot of them, they shit on college. I remember having somebody in the process who was in college and was like, I don't want to do this. I want to finish college. It is a dream of mine. And I'm so glad he left because you're right. He needed that and he should have been going, and it was shit advice. They would always say there's no such thing as good debt. Respectfully, that's bullshit. That's horrible advice, because then I left there. The club owner would always say, if I could have a credit score of 0, I would. I'd no credit cards, no nothing. They would tell you, do not go into quote debt for anything, pay cash for it. When I left, I had a pretty shitty credit score. I did not have a good credit score, which you know what that means? A lot of bad things. It doesn't mean,
yeah.
it meant at the time I couldn't do a lot of things.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is like in this life, like you can't not have a credit score. Like that is horrible advice. Even like, I guess if you're paying cash for everything, like maybe you don't need one, but that's crazy. I'm sorry that happened to you. I was kind of fortunate because I've always been very finance driven and I love like numbers and budgeting, and I've always been very save forward. So I had paid off, like by the time I met them, I had paid off like 2 cars already. And I had like 2 credit cards that I was using like in good order. And my credit score has always been like very healthy. Actually, my husband and I just bought a house. So we're like, I'm super fortunate to have not really like fallen into like debt. But they did encourage me to open a credit card that was actually connected to Amway. And the only point or like benefit from it was it would give you like Amway points. That was horrible advice. And once again, I have closed that card since, and it actually bumped my score up when I closed it because my health or my age got older, but because it was like my youngest card. But like my other 2 cards are great in rewards. Like and I could have opened like a Discover card or, something that would give me mileage, like, I don't know, anywhere, like with anything. And instead I opened an Amway point card that wasn't even giving you that many Amway points. Like it was kind of horrible. It's very just interesting of like how much like when they sell you a dream, like they even say like we're selling you a dream, we're giving people hope for the future, for their lives and blah blah blah. And it's like all these little pieces of reality are good if they're not overdone in excess. So for one point of like reading every day and bettering yourself, that's an amazing thing to do. But you should be allowed to read for fun as well as reading like a self-help book or a business minded book or something, They sold me a dream and I had such a big dream when I entered them. At first I was like, hey, like I just want a peaceful life. And then I started dreaming really big of like, no, like I want to like retire people with my family. Like I want to retire, like I want to do all this stuff. And it wasn't reality. And I think like when I got out, they ultimately stole my dream because I like didn't want to do anything, like I didn't want to set goals. I didn't want to move forward. And in my nature, luckily, like I did still do really hard work at my job and I was still able to move forward in my life. But that's a testament to me ultimately because it was really hard to overcome that for a long time of feeling like, holy crap, if I set a goal, then I have to do it. Like I have to do it. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's exhausting to feel like if you don't, like you're a failure, like you're completely
Yeah.
unworthy, blah, blah, blah. And that goes
Yes.
into like feeling like that for a long time, obviously, but they definitely
They
enhanced
did.
that.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And it makes me really sad that they do that to people because I can truthfully say it wasn't maybe until like last year when I went through therapy that I got out of that mindset because I have a healthy relationship with my family, my friends. Like I even get to meet amazing people here. Like this is how we get to help people. We don't have to rely on worldwide anywhere. We don't have to like manipulate people. We can quite literally share our stories and it means something because in worldwide we were silenced. We weren't allowed to speak because we were not brainwashed enough. We didn't manipulate enough people yet. And it just continued up the line.
I will say, like, I know I said like I'm ashamed of some of these choices, but ultimately I'm not ashamed of where I am in life. Like I work very hard and I'm going to continue to do so. I think I should separate myself from some of these choices ultimately because they were my choice at the time, but when you look at the greater picture of like everything going on in my life and having so much faith, so much hope. Like, I don't know, like I shouldn't have been sold that type of dream. I was looking to these people to be mentors in business and in life, and they were giving horrible advice. And then they were manipulating you and saying, oh, well, you're gonna go to your parents who are divorced, which my parents aren't divorced, so yes, but like, you're gonna go to your dad who's been working the same job at X, Y, and Z, and like, yeah, okay, no, actually, like my dad works really hard and takes raises and stuff. Like he got himself out of the ghetto of Portland to being living middle class in Hawaii. Like that is crazy. And my relationship with my parents is a fun one, funny, but I will say, like, they are hard workers. They did instill that in me. And, it sucks to say, like, this organization really hurt my relationship with them for a while. And yeah, you're right. They're trying to say they're setting you up for success. They're setting you up to do this. But I did buy my cars in cash already. Why am I spending hundreds of dollars on your products that I don't like? Okay, I will say I
Yeah.
did like some of the hair care products and some of the skincare products, but they were so expensive.
Yeah. They were definitely. I mean, I think everything that you said is totally valid and it's true. Like even if you have a complicated relationship with your parents, hey, number one person here, I do not have a relationship with my mother, period. And they try to say that everybody can do this, and I don't personally believe that. But you're right. It's the things that they tell us to do, they manipulated us into all of that. So no, I totally agree. Definitely like separate yourself from that because I feel like that was not the actual Hannah. That was worldwide Hannah. The same way that I had worldwide Danny. Like I'm not proud of the things that I did when I was in worldwide too.
Say like the relational piece with it too was so important to me. And it's kind of funny because it really made it hard. Like I kind of mentioned this earlier, it really made it hard to make friends for a while because when I realized, I also mentioned this earlier of like I was getting sick when I got out. And like by getting sick, I was experiencing a chronic illness where I puke a lot, like randomly with different triggers. And this puking can last like a day or it can last like a week to a month, you know. And it's like every day, like you're just like constantly puking, you can't keep anything down. In between episodes, I'm relatively normal. I was having like all of these episodes, and I'd always shown signs of this like growing up and stuff, but I had never had like a full blown episode the way that I did when I was in this business. And they like didn't really care. Like they kind of didn't really message me. I was still sending capes, they call them. they like very like didn't respond. And then I remember like I stopped listening to my stuff for a while and like a couple weeks, and she finally messaged me and was just like asking about the business, or like, oh, like, are you okay? Like, why aren't you building the business anymore? And I was like, oh, like, I'm like, I told you, like, I'm not feeling good, like, I'm puking, blah, blah. She's like, oh, like, still, like, weeks later, I'm like, yeah, I'm like going to the ER like once a week almost to get fluids because I can't keep it down without an IV. And she like offered, I think like half-heartedly offered, was like, oh, like maybe after work I can drive you up something. And I was like, no worries. Like, I had my grandma luckily was like there to kind of help. But I mean, it's crazy. Like they just didn't care about me, and they just cared about their business in it and just teetered off from there. And then they said things like, oh, like, you haven't been reaching out, you haven't been building the business. Like you said, they'd always like only make time for you if you had time for the business. And I've had to relearn relationships, it relearn how to
Yeah.
make friends, relearn how to just be happy for people and not, like allow people to just relax, like not judge people for having a good time. And if you're any of my friends listening to this, I'm not judging you. I'm judging myself. But like I really
Yeah.
had to like just be happy with people. And it took me a really like it's like been this year that I feel like I've finally been a little bit successful in making some progress in built like
Yeah.
rebuilding relationships. And I have amazing friends. I have amazing friends in Washington that I've had for a long time. I have amazing friends here. I have some that even made it through the business with me. Like, not that they were in the business, but they watched from afar and
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
judge me too hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I totally agree. And that's true. I think you're speaking to something that is something we don't really talk a lot about here, and I think we should. That yes, being, I guess, quote normal, and I don't say normal to sound derogatory. I know that whenever I talk about neurodivergence, we all know that I know that there is no normalcy. But when you're talking about a regular life outside of worldwide, it is hard to kind of go back to that because you're so brainwashed. So when you think about that same aspect of coming out of worldwide, it's hard to develop relationships, especially when you're taught for the longest time that somebody who plays video games is a horrible person. They're lazy, they're awful. Like my significant other, I can't speak enough to how hard he works. Like he works sometimes 16-hour days. He does not sleep very much. He plays video games maybe like once a week. And it's like, that's his thing. That's his hobby. That's his like decompressing from the world. It doesn't ever come before our family. But it was a hard time for me to be like, oh, that's okay. So it's the same thing as me watching like The Office or something. Like it's something that helps me decompress from the world. It is hard to overcome that. And I think that your vulnerability and talking about that, I really appreciate it because, like I said, we haven't talked about that too much. So thank you for bringing that up.
I think it's crazy to talk about too, of like, there is a certain level that I was already a hardworking, driven person. I was already kind of entrenched in that like capitalistic mindset of like do, 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 do. But Worldwide took it to such an extreme. I know that you're gonna post my screenshots of some of my schedules
Yes.
from that time. So I was doing that schedule for months. My chronic illness is a mitochondrial like defect. It's really weird, bizarre. So
Yeah.
not something I can totally control. But they make you feel bad when there's things out of your control, And that's
Yeah.
where it becomes really toxic, Like I am all for a very like hardworking life. I'm all for, play hard, work hard, play hard, but they don't ever get the play. They talk about the play all the time. They dream about the play, but they don't ever
Yeah.
get to play. And that's the problem. That's the burnout. There's so many layers of manipulation with like the way that they talk about stuff. And the reason that it did take so long afterwards to see it negative is because they set you up to leave the moment you first enter that room. They set you up to be wrong if you leave.
They will say that. They will say, don't go. Like, it's almost like within the first like 30 minutes of you sitting in some sort of a meeting. Don't go Googling this. Don't bring that stuff about taking this to your grandma who says this is a bad idea, your dad or your mom or your friend or somebody on Reddit. Like, they really do that. But no, I think that everything that you have talked about has been so helpful. And I hope it was helpful for you as well. Now that you're out of Worldwide, what is life like now?
Life's pretty great. So, I actually got married and got married in Hawaii, which is really fun. We did like a reception in Florida. We just bought a house. we're both like pretty set up in our jobs. He's actually in one more semester of school and then going to graduate with his degree, which I'm so proud of him. And it's the same thing that you said. Like, my husband is such a hard worker, but he likes to play his video games, but he also pours like a lot of time into me as well. But they would have you believe like he's like not a good guy. I actually met my husband while I was a part of Worldwide, and they did not like him. They did not want me to like continue talking to him. We were long distance, so that was even a bigger reason. They were like, "Why would you even want to like begin? Like, I thought you were being single." And I was like, "Well, I was, but like I think I could actually have a beginning with him. For them to even think they had the right." It's crazy to me, but so life's a lot better. It's getting better and making new friends. I did move to Florida, so that was really awesome. I moved in at the beginning of 2021. That move has been amazing. It was definitely like harder even to make friends because of that move. But now that I've like gotten into my zone, like started really deconstructing some of these beliefs in a more healthy way than just hating myself. Like, it's been good. It was also interesting when I was in, they like I said, I didn't hear about it being Amway until the very end. But when I was leaving, one of the things I think that kind of also launched me out is they started getting a lot more salesy. They started getting a lot more focused on Amway and the products, which legally I think they had to do because
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be in a recruiting business, but that's all they ever talked about was just helping people. Oh my God. Anyway,
Yeah. No,
um,
they did. You're right. It was this is a people business. This is a mentorship opportunity with a business attached. That is what I heard when I was in. And so now I would like to think Zay and Melody had a little bit to do with the fact that Amway had to start cracking down, especially with the fact that you have to have verified customer sales. But Worldwide
yeah,
allegedly has their loopholes. So
crazy how much they do to set you up with that. But the moment when Spring Leadership was on Zoom, and I was like, why am I doing? I was like, what am I doing right now? Like, I had turned my camera off, and in one of the meetings, it wasn't Spring Leadership, obviously, but like one of the other meetings, I had turned my camera off, and they were like, like messaging me, like, why is your camera off? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, like technical difficulties. They like figure it out for next time. I'm not sitting in my home for 3 to 4 hours for this guy to like yell success principles that I've heard the same exact
Mhm.
speech weekly. When you're prospecting,
Yeah, oh
you have
yeah.
to be at every meeting that your prospects are going to, and your prospects have to go to one meeting a week, and then you have to go to like the ones. I think it's like once a month you have like the rallies and regionals or whatever, and then you had like every 3 months the big meetings. So that we're at the Coliseum. So they were actually at the Portland Coliseum, so I didn't have to travel the 6 hours or whatever in the hotel stay. We just had to wake
Yeah.
up really early. I was going to like multiple a week in the height of it, like maybe like almost every day. And then I was also
Yeah.
like, in addition to that, having like meet and greets and one on ones and all these different things. Like, when you guys see the schedule, every single hour of my day, starting from like 3 a.m. to like a midnight, then that day like was scheduled out. I was sleeping, like my sleep schedule started at 3, and it was like if I could get to bed earlier, then good. And it woke up at like 8 or 9 every day. Like, that's crazy. That is not enough sleep. And I was so tired. I was so exhausted. And I was only eating these products. And guys, when I tell you, like, my grocery budget shrunk, at one point, I was granted like getting a little bit of government help, so that did help it stay like a little more healthy. But my portion of it was like $30 to $40 for a month.
What?
And like
That's
that's like crazy.
insane.
And I was not earning that much from the government. Like, guys, like I really truly wasn't, because it was only a single person, and I
Yeah.
was making like a solid amount of money according to them because of DoorDash and everything. So I would
Yeah.
mostly, maybe, I think my total grocery budget for the month was like $100.
Which is not enough. I mean, even for a single person, because you have to imagine like things are expensive. And for you to actually be able to eat healthier, things are expensive fruits, vegetables, and you need more than just one bell pepper for the whole week. Like there's so much to it. So, yeah, no, I mean, we. We grocery shop for a house of four. It's a lot. It is so much more than when it was just me and my oldest child by ourselves, and they would always tell us too. They'd be like, "Hey, you need to limit your grocery budget." I'm like, no, I never did that because I mean, one, my child is neurodivergent, so he has like he's picky and I don't even like to use the word picky because it's not that he does it on purpose. It's quite literally his
It's
neurodivergence that
textures
causes
and
this.
tastes, yeah, like, if you think about a blueberry, there's, like, squishy and sour and, like, big and small, like, there's all these different tastes and textures that you're getting, but when you get, like, a cracker, it's the same every time, so I get it.
But no, I mean, my son would not eat those products. He hated them. He thought they were disgusting. So I wasn't going to force him to eat them. And honestly, they would stack up. I started giving them away to my roommate and she was like, I don't like these. I tried giving her vitamins and she violently threw up. So did I. I didn't take vitamins. I would say I did. I would send pictures of my tackle box. I didn't take the vitamins. I broke out with a lot of their skincare products, but I wasn't allowed to tell anybody that. So yeah, no, the level of deception, it goes so deep. Like I think we could talk about this. Like there's never going to be a lack of stories. There's never going to be a lack of us talking about this. I enjoy this topic. It's hard. I know that it's not the easiest topic to talk about, but I hope that this has been helpful to you. Do you have any last thoughts that you would like to share? Maybe some things that you'd like people to know, or what would you like to leave the people with?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on here. I think if I just have to leave you guys with something, it's that just like trust your gut on stuff and, talk to a lot of people. If even if you don't necessarily agree with their opinion that they come to or the advice that they give, if you're getting multiple people's opinions on things, or like even not necessarily opinions, but just talk about your opportunities with people, that should not be something that has to be kept to yourself. You should I love collaboration now, like, in my workspace and my personal life. I love telling my friends stuff and having them to come to me with things too. Like, they don't always agree with my advice for their friend or for their boyfriends, whatever. But at the end of the day, you should have like more people to be able to have like your stream of information should never just come from one place, no matter what
Yeah.
that place is, So, if I can give anything, is that hard work, putting time into yourself, doing all these things is so important, but allow yourself grace, Do these things in balance. Life is about balance, and that's like I think the biggest thing that I'm always learning is just take balance with everything you do.
Yeah. No, that was really good. I love that. And everything that you said is so valid, especially the balance part. But how can we support this movement? How can we support you and sharing your story?
If anyone is able to just like not join or just have full information before joining this organization, I think that's going to be just an amazing time or experience for me. Like, I obviously won't even necessarily know if someone doesn't join because of this, but I think for me, just getting this story out there, having it heard, I think is going to be pretty powerful. Ultimately, I just feel like it'll be heard.
But no, I love that. And yeah, definitely if you hear this episode, please share it. Like if you know anybody who's saying some culty shit, just share it. They might not appreciate what you have to say. They might not even listen right away. It might even take them a decade to listen, but don't give up on them. I mean, that is key. I know that I'm grateful for the people who didn't give up on me. So but no, if you guys have a story that you would like to share, please DM me on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at xsnt.podcast. That goes for TikTok as well, xsnt.podcast. You guys can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, YouTube as well. So if you have a story to share, please let us know. You can share as much or as little as you want. Doesn't even have to be anti-MLM. It can be trauma. It can be awareness. It can be whatever it is that you would like to be heard about. Please let me know. But other than that, you guys, thank you so much again, Hannah. I really appreciate your time, and we will catch everybody on the next episode.